and then hand it straight over to Hamza. So just give me a second. Okay, the recording's just started. Okay, great. So welcome everyone to another series in CPD in 43. Today from Gensler / Hamza Shaikh, who will be talking about AI hybrid craft, the evolution of the architectural medium. He's been looking into this element which has been very fast and developing in our environment. So it should be very cutting edge, new and exciting. Obviously, this is only a CPD in 43, so very short introduction. And obviously, there's much more that you can do in looking into this in further detail. But without further ado, I'll hand straight over to Hamza, and we can then obviously pick it up in our Q&A session towards the end. So Hamza, I'm going to hand it straight over to you.
Thank you, Usman. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Cool. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here and talk to you all. I like to do things quite differently, and I put a lot of pressure on people to put their cameras on. However, I can see that cameras have been disabled. So in that case, please leave questions and comments. I'd love to see them. I always enjoy having these things interactive, so please try to do that. And equally, I also really enjoy Q&A sessions. So Usman, I'm not sure how you intend to do that. Is that going to be through text, or will people be turning their microphones on and having more of a discussion style Q&A?
So what will happen is that we'll have the Q&A towards the end. We'll encourage everyone to post their questions into the chat box. I'll then read them out and field them to you, and then it'll be backwards and forwards between ourselves.
Sounds good. All right, let's get straight into it. Look forward to your questions, guys. But let me explain a little bit more about myself, because I think that's going to set the context of this discussion, this presentation. So you've been told that this presentation is going to be about AI hybrid craft, and you're probably asking lots of questions around the whole AI craze. For a bit of context, I want to explain what I actually do. So my passion really started a long time ago on social media, actually, pushing experimental drawing methods. So way before the AI generative craze that really kicked off in the last 7 to 8 months, I was extremely kind of forward pushing the experimental drawing methods. And what that meant is I've always been passionate about looking at how architects can communicate their ideas in multiple drawing methods. So using various mixed media techniques, even kind of digital media techniques to showcase their vision. And that has led to various opportunities recently, for example, where I've written a book, and I'll tell you guys very briefly about that book. I've actually edited the book, primarily bringing in various speakers, various, you could say, architectural illustrators / influencers, and putting together their works in a way for students to learn new drawing styles. So why am I telling you all this? Well, you can see, so some of these drawings here have gone far back enough just to show you the level of kind of experimental conceptual drawing that I was exploring. And my real passion, as I said, is to think of an idea, and those ideas are all my kind of architectural synthesized kind of fantasies embedded within my practice thinking mind as well. So thinking about how these things can actually actualize. Now, if any of you have been to architecture school, or know about architecture school, you will know that that's something we're constantly tasked with in university, which is to come up with almost these fictional, fantastical ideas, but ones that ask very real questions about the world and how we build. So this is an example of some of the drawings that I would do that kind of provoke ideas and ask the what if question. And what this has led to in the AI phase, which has kind of come recently, is I'm able to experiment a lot more vigorously. So if any of you have used AI tools, and this is just for context, this is the very first image I prompted, which was sort of almost a year ago now. And this was using, if anyone knows, what would be really good to know is how many of you have used AI tools? Is there a way we could do that as a poll, or you could just quickly say me on in the comments or the chat? If it's not possible, it doesn't matter. But usually whenever I go into a talk, I like to understand who's used these tools and which kind of tools they've used. But just for context, this is Midjourney, and this is something called version 3. It was one of the early models of Midjourney, and you got fairly crude results in hindsight. But at the time, this was just mind-blowing. Because as a designer, one of the biggest challenges I had was thinking about how I can fuse, from an aesthetic standpoint, fuse different types of vernacular and design languages together to create new ones. So when AI tools came out, and literally diffusion models is literally what they're called, they allowed me to push the boundaries in that sense. So these are some of the early drawings. And where has this led me today, just to kind of finish off this long intro, is this has opened up some really interesting opportunities for me to explore the very forefronts of technology, but with a grounding and basis in architectural craft. So I show you this image because this is one of the drawings, one of the original pieces I selected for my exhibition. And by the way, if you guys are in London and manage to get to perhaps the Rocker London Gallery, which is in Chelsea, please go and check out my exhibition there, where I've been able to showcase drawings as far back as the 1700s. Even this sketchbook page, which was by Alberto Ponis, who was drawing the James Gowan Leicester University building, and Stirling also. We've been able to display these drawings from the past with all the drawings in the future that I identified in my book as important contemporary drawings. And I think this is also going to, as you will see now, form the base of my perspective on the whole AI craze in the field of architecture. So hopefully that gives you a bit of background. We will return, because another point I think is worth mentioning is the reason I always go to Instagram is because the way I use Instagram is a visual archive of all my ideas and work. So it ends up being very easy for me to show people an insight into my life and work on Instagram. But we are here to understand this AI hybrid craft, the evolution of architectural medium in the intelligence revolution. So you heard a bit about me, and I want to talk about this. So what's actually happening with the AI revolution? And this is the way I see it, right? So we've got two things going on. It's the rise of diffusion models and large language models, so LLMs. So what's actually happening is AI has always existed. We've heard that countless times. It's true. It's existed for a long time, shall I say. And it runs in the very softwares and technology that you use every day. You've probably used it today, even if you think you hate AI, you've used it. It's in when you do your predictive text model, with your predictive text models. When you type in stuff to your Outlook or Google, it finishes the sentence. That's AI. You taking your phone out and unlocking it with your face, that's AI. So AI has always existed. What's actually happening now is these new technologies that have been developing for a long time have finally broken the ceiling, and that is diffusion models. So what are diffusion models and what are large language models? To put this simply, if you know about Midjourney, that's a diffusion model. If you know about ChatGPT, that's an LLM. So on the left, you're going to see a table that kind of states the differences of what these things are in a bit more technical detail. And I'll go through it quickly, and then we'll go through the simple explanation on the right, which is actually very useful. So on the left, we can see that the difference in function between, let's say, Midjourney and ChatGPT is diffusion models generate models, generative models used for image generation and manipulation. LLMs used for natural language processing tasks. Diffusion models take images as input and generate modified versions. LLMs process text input and generate text output. Diffusion models are deep learning architectures like VAEs or GANs. I won't go into detail what these things are, but essentially it describes the way that these algorithmic processes work. Actually, GANs is very interesting. These are generative adversarial networks, and put simply, it's like having. It's really interesting because what you have is in a diffusion model, you could think of it as an artist, two artists, and one artist is basically saying to the other artist, that doesn't look real, do it again. And that's the whole generative process, which ends up making increasingly real images. But it's a lot to kind of talk through if I explain that in depth. But what else you need to know is LLMs are run on RNNs, and what RNNs are, they basically they basically take in large amounts of textual information and they predict what the next word will be. And it actually works, is a similar connection between diffusion models, but the main distinction you'll be able to understand is that it's text versus image, and one is predictive and the other one has a much more complex algorithm. Diffusion models work with hugely large data sets of images, and LLMs work with extensive text corpora. And one thing people should know as well is these are data sets, especially for diffusion models, that have already been established. They don't necessarily tap into live data sets or the web, if you like. However, LLMs, especially GPT-4 and Google's Bard, they have the capability of using live data sets straight from the internet. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a understanding of the distinction. And I think it's important to make this distinction because when we are talking about what's truly revolutionizing the field of architecture, it is diffusion models. Because I will admit, LLMs, ChatGPT, all these things, they have a huge effect on the field of architecture, but they have a huge effect on every other field. There's a mass revolution going on in the technological landscape for every profession, even professions that have nothing to do with tech. You know, the way the NHS is going to operate is going to be drastically different. So the reason I focus on diffusion models is because there is a deep concern that is bubbling up, and deep amazing opportunities bubbling up with regards to architecture and images and also videos, but we won't go too deep into that. So here are some interesting examples that some of these people I actually know quite well, and I know that what they are doing is they're creating provocative images that really try to kind of cement the value that architects provide to society. And the way I see it is what architects really provide to society in terms of a value proposition to the public is being able to dream and visualize and ask the what if questions. Can architecture be on wheels? What happens if we use diffusion models and anthropomorphize our architecture? That's something architects have been obsessed with, to almost anthropomorphize architecture. And Hassan Ragab does an incredible, you guys have to check out Hassan Ragab on social media. Look at the way he uses stable diffusion to basically bring to life his architectural ideas through these overlaid stable diffusion renders on Michael Jackson dancing in this example. You have to see it to understand. And Carlos Bannon asking, can the heart of a building beat with softness and color? So what's going on? These guys are rising to prominence and, in for the lack of better words, going viral and having a huge effect on public discourse and how the public sees architecture. But what's happening in the actual profession? So in the actual profession, diffusion models are having an effect. And what we're seeing is we have some very interesting softwares emerging, and there's rapid development going on. Some of you may have heard of Stable Diffusion. I've mentioned it a couple of times. Many of you may have even heard of Veras, which is a really interesting plugin that is actually available now that you can use with Revit and SketchUp and Rhino. And what these tools do is essentially take a raster-based image outcome. So on the left, you can see this is a still image, probably on Blender by the looks of it, or 3ds Max. And then it's taken into Stable Diffusion. And Stable Diffusion is to put simply, it is a very stripped back raw coding interface for, and it's not really coding, it's more parametric interface for essentially like Midjourney, but just with way more control and way more kind of user interface details. So what it does is it takes the image and it uses something called control net, which is really why most people use Stable Diffusion now, because it is able to use something called control net, which maintains exactly the geometry of the images you give it. So this is what's really breakthrough. So you can see in the image left and right that the term I've been using is true image weight. So the difference between all this stuff, which is, you see, read at the top, flexible ideation, tools like Midjourney and DALL-E, is that they don't have a capacity to maintain true image weight, which means they're extremely useful for flexible ideation stages. However, as I mentioned, Stable Diffusion and Veras, they are able to give us controlled ideation. They're able to almost replace, and this is a huge disruption that's going to occur with the visualization softwares. Probably they will also try find a way to upgrade using AI. Is that you can now do these visuals with true image weight, i.e. you load in your structural frame, you load in your architectural idea, and you can instantly hit render, for the lack of better words. So this is really, really breakthrough, and is already having huge effect. Now, let's think beyond image generation. Now, beyond image generation, I could sit here and talk to you about the idea that in the latter stage architectural process, there are insane, well, let me put it this way, actually. Have any of you seen massive innovations in the latter stage work or latter stage process when it comes to AI? You can't answer, don't worry, I'll answer. No. And the reason is, and this is actually quite shocking, because if you were to ask the question, and I'll show you my face for this because I want to actually make you think. So if you actually kind of rewind and you think, okay, before AI, when these AI tools come out, where will they have the biggest effect? I think one would answer, obviously, in the tasks that we don't want to do, the tasks that we would allow to be automated and are much more procedural and technical. And I would say that. And the reason I would say that is because that's essentially what you would argue that AI is there to do, and technology in of itself, to take the tasks that humans might not want to do. However, AI is such a strong technology. It's actually infringing on what humans want to do as well. And what's really interesting is all the rapid evolution and revolution going on has been going on in the early stage, the part we really want to do as architects, the creative side. So this is why it's also kicking up a huge craze. And I just wanted to make this point because I've written about social media's effect on architecture. I honestly think that this was an intentional move. I think the guys at Midjourney and OpenAI were like, look, we need to make big impact. We could use these AI tools to innovate in massive ways when it comes to kind of more integrated BIM modeling things and all these other software companies. But they went for the image revolution first because, think about this, social media primary fuel is images. As soon as Midjourney launched, everybody went crazy generating images. The image generation, and you've just got I've just revealed to you the title of potentially my next book. Please don't steal it. Is where we are in the image generation now. We are the image generation, my generation. And I think that's a really interesting thing. But it begs the question, what is going to happen to the latter stage processes? And that is when the design is frozen, when we have planning approved. What about the actual BIM level integration of AI? This is such an important question because if I share my screen again, what I've realized is it's almost a question that doesn't even need to be asked. And the reason is, you've seen what happened with Photoshop, right? Recently, Photoshop launched the generative AI tool, which allows you to just select things and boom, and instantly they're a huge competitor to Midjourney and all these other diffusion models. So there are so many companies that already established, Autodesk, NVIDIA, and who, by the way, NVIDIA creating Omniverse, which is going to be a huge disruption. You need to watch out for that as well. And if you have any stocks in NVIDIA, congratulations. These companies are you can take I'll bet on this. These companies are going to integrate very quickly. They're developing these tools right now. I actually already do have some insight that they're just waiting for the right time, because these things are much more complex, and they're going to have drastic effect and change the way we interact with, say, Revit, Rhino, AutoCAD. I don't use AutoCAD anymore. All these new companies that are going to emerge that allow the BIM process to be completely automated. And I, as somebody who wants to be very cautious with AI, would welcome wholeheartedly full, and I'm being bold enough to say this, full automation of latter stage work. Because why the hell not? That's the part of the process that should be automated. It's the early stage which we need to be very, very careful about. But beyond image generation, this is something very, very interesting to notice, which is companies that are in the architecture space who are now taking AI, and they're not saying, all right, what do we do early stage? What do we do latter stage? They're saying, we're starting new companies. We're going to create new value propositions. Architecture in of itself is going through, I would say, a bifurcation, is going through this complete split of what architects' roles actually are. And this is something I've been pointing to for many years. I have a podcast called Two Worlds Design, where I was exploring the multidisciplinary potential of architecture. And I highly recommend you go and check that out, because all the stuff I was talking about is happening, and AI has catalyzed that. Let's take a look at this. This is insane statistics, okay? These are startups. And if any of you are looking to partner with startups, write these down. Upcodes. Now, they have a 5-year search growth of 933%. What are they doing? They're a startup that provides tools for constructing code-compliant buildings for architecture, engineering, and construction. They have an advanced search engine that's built for the construction space. Oh, sorry, am I not sharing my screen? Or is that someone else? Am I sharing my screen?
The screen's not being shared.
Oh, sorry. Osman, how am I doing on time, quickly?
You've probably got about 5-10 minutes maximum.
Okay, this is going to be
and then
rapid,
it will
guys.
go into the Q&A.
Get ready. All right. Upcodes, 933% 5-year search growth. There is startup. Let's try and understand what they're doing and what the future of architecture could be. And startups are having a huge kind of explosion right now. They provide tools for constructing code-compliant buildings for architecture, engineering, construction. They have an advanced search engine that's built for construction space, where users can make systematic searches for building code. Cove tool, 1,600% 5-year search growth. It's a web app tool that lets architects and designers access buildings' impact on sustainability. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the big one. Sustainability, this one thing we've been trying to tackle so vehemently, is now going to be unbelievably kind of resolved, honestly, with these AI tools. The people who solve the AI sustainability problem are going to be at the very, very forefront. Hence, there's a 1,600% 5-year search growth on this. Those are the solutions we definitely need to resolve. It provides continuous end-to-end support and automated performance analysis to assist with decision making, which also allows them to find the least costly approach, not just sustainable. Plan Radar, 361% growth. Is a project management tool for real estate project documentation, has direct communication digital platforms for easy ticketing, and they make construction more efficient. ArcBazaar, this is a cool one, 400% growth, is an online architectural competition platform where architects, designers, and interior experts compete. It offers clients access to hundreds of architects and designers, creating a freelance marketplace. Archistar, 500% growth. AI-driven software that aims to assist architects, property professionals, and individuals in making better decisions. Use machine learning, software aids profitable sites in designing feasible buildings. So this is early stage. Can I Build? French architecture startup, 800% growth, offers 3D modeling platform for architects to make the design process more efficient and collaborative. They have software that can convert 2D drawings to 3D models and simulate lighting and materials for accurate visualization. And they also integrate with BIM. Hyper, I've shown this, even though it has a minus 100%. It's one of my favorite startup companies because, by the way, it's minus 100 because they've already gone through their round of funding and now they're just scaling. But Hyper is a cloud-based platform for generating a building system. Basically, you can plug Hyper into your Revit, type in, I want a 5-story building, and you can use this today. You can type in, I want a 5-story building with dual core and a podium at level 3, and so on. You can type that stuff in as an LLM, and you'll get that BIM integrated generated in front of your eyes. And finally, HiArc, 300% increase is it reduces the time to make construction ready design. It's a design software tool, incorporates planning phases, material list, 3D sales tools, and has access to permit construction documentation. Okay, so this is a diagram I've done to show what, if we were to use, for example, some of these tools in our traditional workflow, what would happen? Now, what you can see is as these, what could happen is we could, is our concept design stages 0 to 3. They are currently, let's say they run at sort of 7 to 8 months. Usually companies try to do that a lot faster. They end up going 5 months. And then we have these AI tools that can speed that up to almost 2 or 3 months for the whole concept design delivery, maybe even shorter. That does beg the question of what the actual outcomes are. But the point I want to make on this, and I want to be as fast as I can, is it's shortening the time, but the time that we gain from this, there is our real opportunity is not to do things faster, but to do something even more valuable with the time that these tools create. I'll say that again. It's not that speed and making things faster is going to be the most important thing with using these tools. It's what we do with the time that it creates. And I'd be curious to know what you guys think about. I have my ideas of what we can do with that time. I'd be interested to know what you think. Generally, I think that time we could be used for everyone to be and to work more creatively, and maybe give us a 4-day working week. So here's my summary. I think our profession is almost going to bifurcate when it comes to very large practices. I think we are going to be able to manage all these stages. I think the early stage revolution is going on right now. The latter stage revolution will probably kick off soon. And what will happen as a result is we're going to see architecture and the role of architects be completely not dissolved in a bad sense, but become almost disintegrated in the most positive way I could describe, and have far more value proposition at much wider levels of the industry and wider. Architects working in user experience design and all those other examples I showed you of those startups who exist today. And just to finish, all the books that I have been reading recently on AI and all of the research and conferences I've been attending and talking through show me that it's not the death of the architect. Okay, as a result of this bifurcation, and our value proposition spreading so much far, dispersing, doesn't kill us. It means there's going to be a rebirth. The role of the architect is about to enter a whole new world, and that is exciting. And I wasn't able to go through this, but I wish I had more time to show you the way I'm exploring that kind of new intentional mode of working as let's say an architect and visualizer that uses AI tools at the very forefront, but embedded in craft. Please go check out my Instagram if you get time to see some of my work. This drawing is actually on display, I may have mentioned, at the Rucker Gallery. It uses AI tools, but you can see it's a hand drawing, and maybe message me, I'll tell you how I did it. But I think the biggest threat is laziness, and we need to be able to use these tools in very intentional ways. And finally, I promise Usman, I'll shut up after this. Please scan this code if you want to join my workshop where I'm teaching hybrid AI methods. So if you want to become intentional and nuanced and perhaps become the new generative architect in that sense and visualize in ways that use AI tools at the forefront, embedded in traditional craft, I'm going to be teaching that over a weekend.
Great. Thank you so much, Hamza, for that. I know, obviously, just so everyone's aware, we do try to keep our CPD in 43 schedule extremely varied. In some instances, for example, like today, it's an extremely deep end of the swimming pool for some people. Hopefully it's a lot of learning, a lot of things to go away with. Please do field your questions into the chat box. We do have some time now to speak to field questions to Hamza and do a back and forth. But I'll quickly read a couple of questions from the chat box that we have. Oh, a very practical one. What plugins do you use for your models?
I'm assuming we're talking AI related.
Presume so, yeah.
Okay. Well, it's worth mentioning that with regards to practice, things when we're not just wholeheartedly saying use all the tools, guys. Come on, because we need to be a lot more cautious than that. And even kind of the procedure to being able to enable usage of these tools is 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 a lot slower than you might expect, especially at a large practice, because we need to be able to make sure that the right commercial kind of licensing structures are in place. And there's a whole topic that could be discussed around ethics and legality, copyright concerns, and even the value proposition that clients will understand with regards to us using these tools. Are they going to think, oh, if you're using AI, we don't want to pay you as much? So that's just a disclaimer. We aren't integrating these tools like that. With regards to softwares you could use, especially if you're experimenting, and I highly encourage experimentation on a personal level, is I showed Hyper. Hyper is an incredible tool that you can plug into Revit, to Rhino, maybe even SketchUp. I think Revit for sure. And that's actually huge, because to have a generative AI tool that fits into Revit is, people would have, no one expected that to come so early. Hyper, Hypar. That plugin is incredible for the way I would use that if I was to use it in practice would be at the early stages when you're coming up with a new build. And by the way, there's a point to make on new builds, and it's not often now that we have projects where it's a complete new build, especially in London. But in those cases where it is a complete new build, it's a very useful tool to set the foundations and basis of a simple envelope and shell, and get the core in and get all the BIM components in to begin with, that you then start to work in more detail. And this is, again, a bigger point about hybrid workflows. We are not going to be fully automating architecture. And although I said I welcome full automation in latter stage, it was almost a provocation. I think in reality, we'll always be working in this hybrid way as people who, it just becomes another tool for us. So Hyper is really good. Veras is very brilliant for early stage work. So these are two plugins I think would really help an architect or a designer or architect's technologist workflow.
Great. Now, devil's advocate. So, what would be the main negative of using AI in architecture? And I'm going to just squash in a few of extra sort of random points that have been made. So, for example, clients will just expect information half the time. I presume, obviously, then there's obviously the fees that could potentially be affected. And then I think I could see something else where someone's saying, ultimately, could it lead to the replacement of us, or is it always going to need someone who is trained to bring that stuff to the fore nonetheless?
Amazing questions. Sorry, I'm used to other forums where people, they're really trying to ask these kind of blue sky thinking questions, whereas what you guys are asking is very, very important technical questions. Maybe it's because you're technical people. It's very, very good question. Look, it's not necessarily devil's advocate, because I myself am the devil's advocate to myself. We are being cautious. We are making sure that we understand the ways in which we use these tools, experiment, and have fun, of course, in your own private environment, ecosystem, and then find ways of, actually, the big question is, what is our new value proposition when we use these tools? because we have to come up with something new now. And this is why I've been focusing on AI hybrid craft. So the key, I think, is we use these tools in a way that supplements and takes our traditional processes to a much higher and powerful level, but it's inherently and it's almost more analog. And why do I say that? Think about this. Today in architecture practices, when you start a design process without AI tools, people go straight to their 3D model. They might do a little sketch for like a day and they go straight to the 3D models, and they're in their 3D models and they start developing and they end up with some boxes and hey, presto, it's a building, and it's a you've affected the world through your amazing design now. However, with the emergence of these AI tools and say people like me who are trying to push the agenda for how using these tools in intentional ways that tie into our craft, we're seeing far more emphasis growing with holding the pencil again, coming back to the basics, coming back to studio craft culture. Now, what that will do is it's going to make us far more intentional. It's going to allow us to focus far more on the creative work. It's going to allow us and the clients to see that we are taking on a far more valuable role in the design process. We just have these incredible tools now that essentially allow our creativity to enter new levels. So for me, I think the question of value proposition and the money thing, like, it's a very good question, but we are trying to find nuanced and very intentional ways of using these tools that will make people go, whoa, what you're doing there is not just typing stuff in and pressing enter. And like I said, I wish I had time to show you the stuff I was working on, because sometimes it takes longer to come up with those things. But what you ends up producing is quality that you would never have even expected.
Thank you. We've got another question in. So you've so I'm gonna is a very practical question, but I'm gonna impracticalize it as well. So you've talked a lot about the implications for architects, but how do you see the implications of AI for technologists in particular?
Yeah.
And my thoughts then go to I've seen a number of examples where they've used AI and 3D printing for particularly, I think the main thing I'm thinking of is printing of parts for the International Space Station, um, where they've used the knowledge of AI to actually print something which is far superior in regards to rigidity and so on, that is now able to be produced using all of the information that we have. And presumably there's a lot of people behind the scenes like ourselves who are guiding and understanding how that can be applied. But I won't take any more of that. But
Usman, let me ask you a question. I think that's a great suggestion, by the way. Can I ask you a question? Summarize what architectural technologists do in one sentence.
oh God, okay. So we look at the science and technology of architecture and bring that, if we're going to really reduce it down to the element that we're very much specialized in, we do look at obviously all the way through the process of architecture, but we sit on that side of things where we're looking at the technology and science of architecture.
Yeah. So so as an architect, we look to architectural technologists to take these perhaps somewhat unresolved ideas that are in the intangible realm and make them tangible. That is probably the most important part of realizing an architectural vision. You guys have such a crucial role to play. Now, how AI integrates into that, I see you guys as, that chart I showed, the graph. I think you guys are in the middle. And that's a very good place to be, because you guys connect the intangible with the tangible. Now, also think about what your title is: technologist, technologist,
Yep.
technology. You need to be fully, I think your field needs to, and you probably already is happening. I haven't been able to look very specifically. Be creating new startup, new bespoke tech tools that allow you to do what you're supposed to be doing, right? Which is to take the intangible and make it tangible, take the somewhat irrational and make it rational. Now, does that mean you all need to become kind of tech specialists and know how to use these tools that can and by the way, this is a huge issue that people are trying to resolve. No tech has been able to really kind of crack this problem, which is, let's say you have a mid-journey image and a whole mid-journey kind of diffusion visual set, and that translating directly into a 3D model. People are trying that. Some very intellectual people in the world are saying they can do it, but I would still argue that no one's done it properly, because they're using things like depth mapping. And I would say, like, technologies like I just described, depth mapping, finding ways of taking that kind of 2D image and making it 3D. I think that's something that you guys might need to do in some ways.
Mm.
And I think there's so much potential of that kind of startup culture within your field, of developing new technologies, bespoke tools that can really tackle the issue of intangible to tangible. Sorry if that's a very umbrella answer.
No. To be honest, roughly verbatim what you've said, I've repeated at university recently to some students, saying that it's almost more than an exciting time at the moment, almost potentially obviously overwhelming, because a lot of things are changing at the moment. However, it's an extremely exciting time at the moment, where almost potential subgroups of specialisms will be created, and so on. So there's quite a lot happening at the moment, and it's really, to be honest, like you mentioned, obviously you just mentioned about startups, but I think there's even more to that. It's like you said, we don't have enough time to go
Yeah.
to go into all of the detail of all these various bits and bobs. Really interesting question, which goes on to a couple of things that you've mentioned. So it appears as though the biggest hurdle to innovation is going to be training, and I believe obviously training the specific people who have these
Yeah.
specific set of expertise, like ourselves. Um, and then in addition to that, I'll tag on another question. You mentioned a course that you're going to be doing, and just a bit more information on that, in just understanding what that will cover, what that will explore, and then obviously at some point you will only be able to cover certain elements. Maybe it's actual the nitty gritty of actually using that software, but for example, will it explore sustainable building design options, for example? Will it focus specifically on visualization and so on?
Yeah. Okay. So the question about training. Now, I thought I was talking about training data sets, because that is a crucial issue. In many ways, it's almost like the same question: training people and training data sets. I think, look, with regards to training people, there is going to be an uptake of these platforms that is unavoidable, happening now. And as soon as already my inboxes are full from people in the office who are saying, how can we use these tools, how can we use these tools? And they will have to learn the basics of these tools. Everyone will have to learn the basics of these tools, just as people learn how to email. That was a new thing, and suddenly now anyone and their grandma can email. So there's going to be a general uptake that everybody needs to self-train themselves to understand how to use the basics of these tools. Will everybody need to become super duper specialists in generative AI technology? No, I don't think so, especially in a field where creativity is so important. And this comes back to that bifurcation thing I was talking about. We have to remember counterculture. Counterculture is going to emerge when there is such a big swell of AI and technology, just the kind of broad thinking. I'm talking big world thinking now. Counterculture will emerge as well. The idea of analog and art being even more valuable now that all these tech tools have come out. So there's always going to be a place for people who have these traditional, quote unquote, old school ways of doing things, because funnily enough, they actually form the basis of our data sets. They form the basis of our thinking. And I'll give you a quick example. The industry of actual tech developers, they have gone through this process a lot quicker than everyone else, because they're tech developers. That those people who knew all the old school methods of coding, they have actually become more valuable, because they're like dinosaurs, because all these new disruptive people are emerging with what they call civic. I think I forget the terms they use, but it's like civic developers, people who are like learning these new generative AI developing methods. They're doing crazy work, but it's based on the foundations of the old school methods and processes. So in the same way, I think we talk about, like, this is why I said the rebirth, because we're still going to have these values, these traditional values, but they're going to be carried and pushed forward by specialists. I do think that. I think there are going to be new roles emerging, and I can say that we're looking at that as well in some ways. I don't want to say too much, but what is this new role of tech creative tech person? That is a new role for sure.
Definitely. I mean, for example, the most recent new role that's been created is a BIM specialist. That virtually every company in architecture has a BIM specialist sat in the office.
Right.
So
Yeah,
it's
good
really.
example.
But let's see if we've got a couple more questions.
Oh,
Well,
sorry, I
let's
didn't
just.
answer the question of this
Oh,
workshop. So yeah, the
oh yeah.
workshop.
Sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
So the workshop, it might be more. It might be very specific to people in architecture, but actually, I think this is very. It's going to be a very important workshop for people who feel like they may have missed the boat. And it's because I actually made this workshop for people who were asking, how the hell do I catch up? So I think this, I'll be honest with you, the boat hasn't left yet. If you join this workshop after this period, because by the way, we're in a plateau, there are innovations going on, but there's nothing huge that has spiked very recently. The boat will be missed soon. And what I mean by that is the barrier to entry and understanding how to use something simple like Midjourney is becoming bigger and bigger. And the way I show that is, if I was able to show you the way I use Midjourney, you might understand that in a lot more detailed depth, because there's so much syntax now being added and complication to the way you can actually prompt and engage with these tools, image source referencing, these suffixes that control image weight, allowing for prefixes that allow for permutations and creating entire visual sets with one prompt. That's something I've been working on. The aim of the workshop is, again, this hybrid craft. So what I'm asking from all the people who join is, one, please have a Midjourney account. It costs like $20 to have a month access. And bring with you a drawing, a painting, a model, something human that you've done that you love. And we will take that source and we will create worlds with it. And check my Instagram for examples.
Great. I'm very mindful of time, actually, so getting very closely getting to 2 o'clock. So I'm going to ask a couple more questions, two only, if we can get through them as quickly as possible, and then I'll do a wrapping up of the session. I've just got two more. Apologies if I've missed anyone. So are you able to integrate spatial principles using LLE modeling?
Very cool. Shall I answer that?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay, so if, let's say you're using ChatGPT, right? First, again, I need to make a disclaimer. ChatGPT is a dangerous tool to be using as a creative, and also as a commercial entity, because when you put into ChatGPT, it doesn't really have, there's no precautions you can take with GPT that won't allow it to enter a wider data set and a kind of collection of data that will then be used for other uses. So an example of that is Samsung had massive leaks quite recently, because somebody at Samsung decided to type into ChatGPT, can you help me with this confidential project? And they named it, and they said, we're working on this technology, confidential technology, and we're trying to do. So then on the other side of the world, someone was asking, oh, I'm trying to think of ideas for innovative technology in the telecoms industry, and it said, Samsung are doing this.
Oh
So
God.
ChatGPT, be very careful. But in terms of generating spatial ideas regarding with LLMs, brilliant question. It one example I can give to that is people have been using GP, and I'll be teaching this in the workshop as well, is what we call prompt formalization using GPT. So you train GPT or Bard, Bard is Google's version, to understand what a Midjourney prompt is by your description. So I've trained my GPT to say, this is what a good Midjourney prompt is. It takes into account all of these things, and I feed it that data. And then there's other aspects to that I ask it to take into account, like make sure it has this level of emotion, this mood, this space, these elements. And when it's trained, it understands what I want. I can go in and I can say, this is the type of architectural style I'm exploring. Give me a prompt. And it will give me a full prompt. And it's remarkable stuff. And then you put that into Midjourney, and this is called like AI pollination. Now you're using multiple AI softwares to feed into each other. It gives you it very much. Hopefully, I'm answering your question. An LLM text-based input and output can give you spatial outcomes. However, my caveat and disclaimer at the end is always hybridize the process further. So that can be a basis, but the way you evolve and iterate that is crucial.
And then the final question before we do a wrap up element is, I feel like quite an interesting one actually. So it's relating to mental health. So with the architectural industry, we're very much known for overworking ourselves with due to a myriad of reasons. Do you believe that AI will be able to assist in reducing or improving that situation?
100% yes. We have to remember that we have great responsibility, honestly, in, and I say this to myself because I'm in a position where I can somewhat influence, at least in my immediate context, how we use these tools. And I promise you, I'm trying to be as responsible as I can to make sure that we're not just driving innovation for the sake of innovation. We're not just pushing these tools for the sake of pushing these tools, that we're doing it intentional and purposely driven, that we want to create, innovate. Like I did this exercise and I'd love for you guys to try it. It's really fun. Going to Chat GPT and you type in, what is technology? And then ask it to simplify the answer. Every time it gives you an answer, say, simplify this, simplify, simplify, simplify. So eventually, shall I tell you what you'll get? Or should I let you
Yes.
find it? Eventually, you'll get something like, technology is to improve people's lives. It's something that can improve people's lives. And that's the key thing. We have new technology, disruptive, revolutionary technology. What's the point? It needs to improve our life. Now, how will our lives be improved? Less stress, 100%. More time doing things that are important and not work related, 100%. Being able to have positive impact on other people's lives. We can do all of this. We now have such a powerful tool that can enable all of this. It's up to you guys, it's up to us to be able to implement these things responsibly, and not just drive innovation for the sake of innovation, but drive innovation so that we can have proper positive impact. And so the graph I showed you, just to finish, that graph I showed you, remember that graph, because we're going to shorten the process. And that is the point. When we do that, that's the point we need to be responsible and say, oh, what do we do now? Oh, we make more money because we put 7 more projects in there. No. We've done, now let's improve our life.
Thank you so much. And I feel like that's a really good point to bring the talk to a close. So I'm just going to share my screen again. Thank you everyone for attending this very special CPD in 43 on AI hybrid craft. As mentioned, we will be uploading the talk to YouTube very shortly after this. The presentation that was used in the event will also be shared to everyone who is registered via Eventbrite. And then I'll just use this opportunity to thank Hamza for doing this talk today. Very informative, very much interesting, and also we look forward to finding more about AI in due course. And obviously there will be a myriad of things that you can go off and look into in more detail, as well as the workshop that he mentioned. And I'll just take this opportunity to highlight the remainder of the talks for the rest of the year. So we've got a talk on how to become a qualified chartered architectural technologist in July. We've got a event in August, which is an introduction to mass timber revolution, which is from the Mass Timber Academy. We've got I feel an extremely interesting talk in September from Peter Apps on how we let Grenfell happen. He's a author and deputy editor of Insider Housing. So one not to miss. We've got another really interesting one in October, protecting the physical and digital engineered world from the CPNI. We've got an inclusive design event in November from a published author, and we've just to bring it to a close, going back to something really technical. In December, we've got technical considerations when designing with brick from Weinerberger. So just wanted to say thank you again to Hamza, and thank you to everyone for attending. And I look forward to seeing you at our forthcoming events.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Usman.